Hello, and thank you for joining us for this session, Unlocking Returns in Inclusive Banking, Meeting the Needs of the Underbanked. You can ask questions via the Q&A chat box on your screen during the session, and you can share your tweets via #BankingRevolution. And now I'll introduce Salim Hussain, Managing Director of Brack Bank Limited. Salim, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Kimberly. And good evening to all our viewers.
So to start off with, what is the environment of inclusive banking in Bangladesh and where you're based? Is there a large underbanked population?
Yes, unfortunately, there is. If you think about Bangladesh, it's a very tiny piece of real estate, about 147, 148,000 square kilometers, inhabited by over 166 million people. So the challenges are very significant. It is easily the most densely populated country in the world. If you thought India was densely populated, Bangladesh population density is actually 3 times that of India, to give you a sense of some of the challenges that the country has. But importantly, over the last decade or and a half, the country has grown very significantly in terms of all financial metrics. Um, it has averaged over the last 10, almost 13 years, a GDP growth rate of between 6 to 7%. And what happens is, Kimberly, in that kind of a fast growing economy, the poor of today or the lower income groups of today are the middle class of tomorrow. And it is not possible for banks to afford to ignore this client segment, because they are going to be very important tomorrow. So you need to be able to bank them today. The challenge, of course, is the fact that while the benefits of financial inclusion are clearly evident to all of us today, uh, banking this large group of lower income people today means that your short term and perhaps even medium term profitability is going to take a big dent. Therefore, the challenge is that banks need to take bold decisions. They need to reach out to rural and semi urban Bangladesh and find new technologies, new platforms, new business models, which are really beyond the realm of what we use today, conventional banking wisdom, as we call them. We have to find new ways to bank this large unserved groups. And if I look at actually the numbers, almost 40% of the population today still remains unbanked outside the formal financial system in Bangladesh. And that is a very large population considering the size of the total population. And importantly, 65% of that unbanked population are women. So there is another challenge there. It is estimated that approximately 50 to 55% of all adults in Bangladesh are still unbanked. And this is despite the fact that over the last 20 or 30 years, the banking channels in the country have grown significantly. There are approximately 60 odd private commercial banks and about 4 or 5 nationalized or government owned banks. There are about, I think, 11,000 odd bank branches. But the fact of the matter is, uh, taken all together, banks, and while the financial inclusion agenda has been moved forward very significantly, meaning that the number of banked adults has doubled more than doubled in the last decades. The fact is the challenge is still very significant. Um, and this challenge was best met, the government felt, by first, about 10 years ago, offering something that was launched many years ago in America, something called agent banking, small cash booths or locations where lower income group people were able to come in and using biometric validation, fingerprints, thumbprints, withdraw and deposit cash, basic banking services. And today we have close to 20,000 such outlets in the country. That has been an important aspect of the overall financial inclusion agenda of the central bank. And then Of course, about 7, 8 years ago, the entire digital ecosystem in the country really stepped up very significantly when mobile financial service was launched. You may have heard of Bcash, a Rocket, Nogod. These are very large mobile financial systems, very similar to those which were launched about 10 years ago in East Africa. So the agent banking plus the mobile financial service in particular together have really accelerated the overall financial inclusion agenda of the country in total. And that has been a very positive development. The fact, though, remains it is still a big challenge because agent banking is basically just deposits and withdrawals, whereas mobile financial services are payments. But more value adding services such as wealth management or insurance and lending, consumer finance or SME finance, that is still has a long way to go.
So, what has Bank done in terms of policy on supporting the unbanked population?
Bragg Bank, Kimberly, is a 20-year bank which was launched in 2001. We actually have our 20-year celebrations later this year, and it's a bank that was launched by the BRAC, which is, you may know, the world's largest NGO. Um, we are a publicly listed commercial bank, and obviously, shareholder value is a very important objective for the bank. Equally important for us is our development objective. We have a very strong socially responsible and sustainable finance lens. Therefore, what we try to do is generate shareholder value for our stakeholders, but do it in a way that is positive vis-a-vis our customer base. Therefore, we're trying to add value to our three client segments: corporate, commercial, retail, and of course SME. And expanding the financial inclusion agenda of the country is very much an important agenda for Bragg Bank itself. I should mention, Kimberly, Bragg Bank is a member of the Global Alliance for Banking on Values. That's about a 10, 11-year-old forum of about 70 odd banks which were put together back in 2010. And Bragg Bank is one of the founding members of that alliance. And banking on values or using values to determine our strategy, our client acquisition, everything we do actually is very much key to what Bragg Bank is all about.
Hmm. And you talked already a little bit about what the government and the regulators have been doing, but can you give any examples of what they've initiated to facilitate change and reduce the number of unbanked people?
Yes, actually, financial inclusion is a very important agenda for the government and the central bank. Obviously, financial inclusion is a very important part of the SDGs and today the Millennium Development Goals that are propagated by the United Nations and have been wholeheartedly adopted by the Bangladesh government. So that is very, very important. The government, the Ministry of Finance, and of course for us, very importantly, the central bank has adopted financial inclusion as its predominant agenda almost. So, in terms of policy setup, in terms of reforms, product design, building a digital ecosystem, the central bank has done many, many things, many initiatives, particularly over the last 10, 15 years. You could start out by talking about subsidies for different disadvantaged or lower income groups. They could be subsidies for agriculture, subsidies for SME clientele, subsidies for women, different support mechanism, policy mechanisms to support financial inclusion for the banking community itself. And of course, over the last 7 or 8 years, a very strong focus in building the technological or the digital ecosystem to support uh, provide the provision of banking to the unserved or the unbanked across the country. That has been a very important agenda that the central bank has pushed. And over the last 2 or 3 years in particular, we see significant benefits coming out of the enormous effort they've put in.
And as well as this kind of official change from the regulators and from the government, the central bank as well, you've talked around how important mobile banking and agent banks are. And can you explain a bit around the type of platforms, for example, that are being used for mobile banking, and also how agent banks are operating and how that really plugs more people into the banking infrastructure?
Sure. Agent banking is essentially uh, a form of outsourced banking services. This is started off in 2014, and today there are about 25 different banks offering agent banking in Bangladesh with about 20,000 odd agent outlets. Bragg Bank started relatively late in end 2019, but we already have 600 odd agent locations. And essentially, this is where, in small towns and villages, an outsourced agent of the bank can offer basic deposit and withdrawal services, mainly relating to cash for lower income groups, the rural clientele. And it is something that has become very, very popular. And while Bragg Bank may have joined the bandwagon relatively late in 2019, our focus has actually been on using the agent banking network that we already have, which is about 600 odd agents, to actually lend money to our very large SME clientele. Close to 50% of Bragg Bank's total clientele is SME based, and that is an area of particular focus and expertise for Bragg Bank. Um, so, along with that, of course, about if I remember correctly, 7 or 8 years ago, the concept of mobile financial services started off in Bangladesh. And while initially it was relatively loosely regulated, over the last 3 or 4 years, the regulations have become much more comprehensive and very, very supportive as well. So essentially, this is the offering. Companies are offering a digital e-wallet, and subscribers do not necessarily need a bank account, but they can deposit and withdraw into their digital e-wallet directly through their bank's account, or if they don't have a bank account, they can do it through one of the 250,000 odd agents that are available in the MFS universe. So they can deposit money, withdraw money, and through the digital wallet, through some very, very user friendly apps, they can send money, they can purchase things. For example, I can walk into a shop and I can use my Visa a credit card or my MasterCard debit card to purchase a pair of shoes. Alternatively, I could use my mobile financial service and make the payment too. So I have the option of using any channel, whoever gives me the best discount or the best value or the best loyalty program. In other words, I have multiple options available. So that is a consumer to consumer, consumer to business, business to business uh, uh, a platform of mobile financial service that is probably the largest in the world today. And while it may at present not be as sophisticated as that available in East Africa, for example, Nairobi, I think it's going to get there very shortly as the central bank mobile financial service regulations also undergo more reform.
And before we go on, just a quick reminder to anyone watching that you can submit questions if you would like to ask Salim about the developing banking population or about banking in Bangladesh. So just to look slightly more broadly now, how was Bangladesh managed during the pandemic in terms of, how has the economy and the banking system survived throughout the COVID-19 pandemic?
Kimberly, for Bangladesh, the challenge was enormous. As I said, in a very small country, obviously, um, uh, and a developing country with a per capita income of about 2,000 odd dollars, you can imagine that this kind of pandemic, which started here in, I think it was March or April of 2020, it has caused havoc. And particularly when you consider the fact that a very large proportion of our earning population uh, are dependent on daily incomes. So as the country has gone through multiple, if I remember correctly, four different lockdowns, each of between 14 to 21 days, this has impacted the economy very, very heavily. But very interestingly, Bangladesh has always been a very resilient economy as well. And despite these four separate lockdowns and four separate waves of different COVID 19 strains, despite all that, the overall economy has rebounded very, very quickly. And if you look at the figures, I think already Bangladesh's growth rate for going forward is already projected to be something between 6 to 7%, which is pretty similar to pre-pandemic levels earlier. And today, every part of the economy has opened up totally. The educational institutions had been closed for many many weeks, but they too have opened up over the last couple of months. So as far as the of course, certain sectors of the economy are still subdued. Hospitality, hotels, restaurants, things like that, cinema halls, etc., etc. But they are slowly coming out of it. But the rest of the economy, especially the large corporates, and importantly, I think the smaller SME businesses have also started rebounding very, very nicely. So overall, I think if you think about the banking sector and the way the central bank has also responded to the challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic, I think that has been a very, very positive um, experience for all of us. I certainly have not seen the central bank respond as agilely, as quickly as they have over the last 18 months in my 36 years of banking career in this country. So that has been very positive, the way the whole economy, the bureaucrats, the politicians, the courts, the regulators, and customers and business people, the economy in general, the way they've all worked together to to reform, step up, to move the overall digital agenda, and then normalize quickly. I think that has been very, very positive, and Bangladesh is certainly a role model in the way it has responded to the pandemic. For a country with such a relatively small economy, large in terms of overall size, but small in terms of per capita income, to be able to rebound so quickly, this is something quite unexpected and something that is extremely pleasantly surprising.
And looking more towards what BRAC's bank-owned strategy is in the future, what are your thoughts? What are your plans for going forwards with the bank?
As I said earlier, financial inclusion is very important to BRAC Bank too. We also see it as a significant commercial opportunity. We've always believed, as our founder chairperson, Sir Fazle Hassan Abed, who also founded BRAC back in the early 70s, has always said, development, if it is to be sustainable, has to be commercially viable. Development cannot be philanthropic nature. So we've always felt that while we want to advance the financial inclusion agenda of the country, we need to ensure that it has a strong foundation and it is commercially viable. So what we were not able to do 5 years ago, we are now able to do with the use of technology. And that is the most important change maker, using technology to reduce costs, to access client segments, geographies that we were not able to do so in the earlier avatar, say 4 or 5 years ago. That is really the mantra going forward. Of course, we also recognize that Kimberly, a country like Bangladesh cannot be totally digitalized overnight, and banks cannot become digital banks or neobanks and survive in Bangladesh. Therefore, our model is very much what we call a phygital model, a combination of high tech and high touch, a combination of the physical and the digital together. Therefore, we will have a combination of branches. We have 190 odd branches. We have 600 odd agent banking locations. We have various digital solutions, ATMs, CDMs, banking app, internet banking, call centers, etc., all supplementing the physical aspects. And very recently, we have actually applied to the central bank to open 360 odd um, cash booths, or what we call sub branches. These are restricted banking licensed offices, which would have maybe 3 to 5 co workers, but would be able to offer basic banking services. So it is a combination of this physical platform, which is going to be supplemented by the various digital solutions that we have. I'd like to mention, Kimberly, that in the last 18 months, in terms of Bragg Bank alone, um, today, 93% of all transactions in Bragg Bank are digital or alternative in nature. Only 7% require a physical footfall into the branches. And if you look at the volumes, almost 54 to 55% of the total volumes in the bank have already moved from branch and operations and physical and paper uh, to digital, and that dial is continually moving. So we recognize that the digitalization agenda is going to continue to grow very, very significantly. But at the same time, in our kind of socioeconomic environment, we will need a physical capability for a number of years as well. And of course, that physical capability, the branch network or the sub branch network or the agent banking network, can gradually be unraveled as more and more of the digital ecosystem expands across the country.
Hmm. And as we approach time now, just one quick final question. What one obstacle do you think is holding more people back from adopting digital banking methods?
I think the government will have to invest much more in the overall digital ecosystem itself. The cost of data can still be prohibitive for many lower income groups. The overall digital ecosystem needs more investment in terms of the infrastructure itself. And perhaps some of the regulations need reform as well across not just the banking sector, but the entire spectrum of regulators to make the digital Bangladesh, the dream of digital Bangladesh, work out much quicker than we expect. So we probably need better coordination amongst the different government functionaries for this to happen quicker. It is moving forward very quickly. We need it to move even faster.
Okay, great. I think we may be time to wrap up there. So, again, Salim, thank you so much for joining us today and for your insights on banking in Bangladesh. It really does sound like there's an awful lot of potential in the market, but there is a lot of growth as well that still needs to happen before you can reach your goals. So, thank you once again for your time today.
Thank you for having me, Kimberly.